Now, when I did that first section of the Pennine Way, I purchased a brand new singing dancing rucksack, and I was blown over by the value for money really of the Van Gogh Sherpa. Now, admittedly at that point as well, prior to setting off on the Pennine Way, although I was aware that I needed to be keeping an eye on the weight of things, I hadn't considered the fact that the rucksack itself, empty, weighed roughly 2 kilos, and I've used it. I've gone off, done the Pennine Way, the first section, with hindsight when I got back, and I began to realise that weight was a more serious consideration, so I changed it. Go Outdoors, in fairness to them, I've used it, I've gone off, but I kept all the labels, went back, had a chat with the manager there, and he was more than happy. It was in a nice clean state. Obviously it'd only been used once, and he let me change it, and I have now purchased this. And here it is, the replacement. I chose the Osprey, and it is the Osprey Rook 65. I've done quite a bit of research. Ospreys come out pretty well in all the reviews, and so they should. They are more expensive. My scales are telling me that my sleeping bag is 1.9 kilos. My sleeping mat, now this is the Cloud Base, cost me 30 quid, christened it for the first time when I went on the first section, and I tell you what, brilliant, really pleased with it. This is a bivvy bag. It's an ex-army one that a very good friend of mine gave to me. Got that sleeping bag inside the bivvy bag, and I was warm as toast. So that is going to come with me, half a kilo. Oh, first of all, very light aluminium wind protector for cooking. I love this thing, it's brilliant. But the pot is excellent, weighs next to nothing. My gas. It's going to be cold. I think we're going to have quite a few brew stops, I'm hoping we are. Cooking in the evening as well. Clean sock, I hasten to add, which lives inside my pot. Cookers. This obviously screws on to the gas. Again, weight wise, next to nothing. That's the reason I chose this over taking fuel. Knife. Some people think it's in a bit of a disgusting state as well, any proper bushcrafters out there, so I'll hastily put that away again. But again, doesn't weigh an awful lot. Like to have a knife with me. Namely because this little chap here as well, this just works beautifully to get a spark. So they go with me everywhere on a wild camping trip. This little chap here, plastic support to place the camping gas on, just gives it that extra bit of support, because you don't want that tipping over whilst boiling water. Why do I take that if I've got that? Sometimes that's easier, sometimes it's quicker, but if it's really windy, I can't get a spark, I've got this to fall back on. Spork, Foon Sport, everyone has a spork. If you haven't got one, you should get one. Mug. Absolute necessity. You can't beat a decent mug for a decent brew. This is your Sawyer mini water filter. We used that first up in Scotland. I used that, brilliant, works really well. This one's actually not mine, I confess. I'm borrowing it off a good friend of mine, but as soon as he wants it back, when he goes off and uses it, I will be definitely getting my own. Now, I say this from experience. The fact is, I've been on the first few wild camping trips I did forever, just going through my bag thinking, where's this, where's that? It's a nightmare. So I have taught myself to pack things and know exactly where they are. So consequently, I have a little black bag. I know where things are. It sounds ridiculous, but it's so handy to know where things are and be organised. Something that I know my wife would argue that I'm not very organised. She's right. Another consideration is lights. What a bargain. God, don't I look sexy. But this thing, this beanie, USB chargeable, keeps my head warm, keeps my ears warm, and it's a fantastic light as well. More than enough, more than adequate for me. Personally, I like to have a bit of extra light. Hello dog, I've got a dog with me again. What do you want? What do you want, you bloody dog? Come on. So when I'm in the tent, I do like to be able to see, you know, particularly as I've just alluded to the fact that I am not the most organised in the world. And there you have a fantastic lamp. It's got this over there, so it hooks on nicely in my tent. I used it on the previous camp. You would have seen it flapping about in the wind. But also, I'd imagine if there's an emergency, you've got a flashing light as well. Solar panel. USB charger, that is a fantastic light, and the fact that it just packs down so small as well, that is a must. I take that on every trip with me, worth considering. Like to have a tiny bit of luxury as well. This is an inflatable pillow, not an expensive one either, I hasten to add, very cheap, but I've used it on quite a number of wild camps so far and it's never let me down. Weighs next to nothing. Nice to have somewhere soft for your head at night though. Waterproof trousers, it probably makes sense to put them somewhere accessible. You don't want them at the bottom of your rucksack, so if you are caught short, it's going to pour down with rain. I'll pop those at the top of my rucksack, nice and easily accessible if I need to get them pretty quick. Little foam mat. Again, keep it handy, keep it accessible. I'll always pop this in one of the outside pockets. Handy when you just sit over, see a rock, a tree, whatever, and you want to sit down, keep your bum dry. Brilliant bit of kit. Never go camping without it. So it's always a bit of a tricky one, this. I personally have got into a routine now of I fill up one of these, which is 850 ml, so not 750, not a litre, but 850. Bizarre, I know, it really doesn't matter. So I like to have one sort of a little bit bigger bag, bottle of water, which I will actually put in my bag. And then either side on the pockets I will have two 500 millilitre bottles of water, which I can obviously just access and drink en route. So, you know, you're talking just under really sort of 2 litres of water. But again, I do emphasise the fact that when I say I take just under 2 litres, this is also with the water filter with me, because clearly you do need access to more water. And unless you can plan ahead on your trip, you know that there's going to be places to purchase water or taps that you can get water. Some parts of the Pennine Way we've already gone across where there just isn't anything around for quite long periods of time, and that's where the water filtration comes into its own from the streams. So there you go, water. Bit of a dodgy one. each to your own, but there's a lot of dependence, you know, how far you're going, what the weather's like, and where the water stops potentially can be en route. So, but do consider it, and it's very, very important. So let's address food and drink. Always good, what I find is at the top of my bag I will have Wacky Wondering bag, nice sealed bag, and what I keep in here is cup of soup, always good, nice dried cup of soup. I've actually got from a ration pack some energy powder just to mix up with water if I just fancy something a bit more substantial than water. Probably be better in the summer when it gets really hot and you want to rehydrate. But these are an absolute must. These are I believe they're called 3-in-1s. I just personally quite like Maxwell House, but Nescafe, they all do them. And it's your coffee with your powder and your milk as well. Sorry, milk powder and sugar. So 3-in-1. I obviously have 2-in-1. I don't have sugar myself. But always good to have a little supply. There's some more coffee there. I've got some whiteners there. So anyway, tea, coffee. That is sealed up and kept at the top of my rucksack. Nice and handy when you want to stop off and have a brew. Also in the top of my rucksack, up at the top, is another sealable bag. And this is where ordinarily this would be full on a trip of biscuits and light snacks, just something to have with your brew really. Again, nice and easily accessible at the top with your tea and coffee. Now you see these at all the outdoorsy shops. Trouble is they're not particularly cheap, but they are obviously very tasty. They're great for your calories, and what's great about boiling the bag is they just fold up, fit in your little saucepan, and do provide quite a nutritious, quite a filling meal relatively quickly. And you've got no washing up either. Obviously take all your rubbish with you, as is the unwritten law with anything to do with wild camping or hiking. But that is the advantage really. The disadvantage on the other hand is these are quite weighty. So again, as I keep harping on about on this video, as an alternative, if you want to just make things a bit lighter, things like noodles, dried food, which you just mix with water, are a great alternative. Perhaps not quite as satisfying, but even with something like noodles that you just throw into hot water, you can add a bit of cold meat or sausage. The guys I go with just like to add in a bit of... Matt is a keen fan of Mattison's sausage, amazingly enough. But anything just to give this a bit of sustenance. But these are 27p noodles that you just chuck into boiling water. Nice and easy, and obviously very, very light. These are the bags that Wacky Wonder has told me all about. I have just cooked a bit of pasta. Poetic license here, obviously I've just cooked the pasta on the hob in my kitchen. But I just want to kind of show you that when you're out in the field, obviously you've got a bag full of cold pasta. And we've just got one of these dolmio, or any sort of pasta sauce, any form of sauce. So it's actually more of an experiment for myself, to be honest, because this is something I'm considering doing on one of my next trips out. So we'll just see how it goes. As they say, is in the pudding. See what it's like. Beautiful. Another idea is take one of these super duper Wacky Wondering bags, as I will now call them, and get yourself an ordinary can of baked beans. These are baked beans with sausages. I know is at HP do the all-day breakfast, which is a bit more you know, I reckon is probably what is in a lot of these, the army ration ones I've had, or the, is it Wayfarers that you can get, but they're like £4 or £5, or they're not flipping cheap. But yeah, get yourself a can of all day breakfast, beans, sausages, whatever, put them in a Wacky Wanderings bag, boil in the bag, so no washing up. There's obviously no weight because you're not taking the tin with you, still a little bit of weight of course, but just an idea and another consideration. When I did my Bleaklow, back to my Bleaklow one, I got into my tent finally after the day's hiking, and it got cold, really cold, and I realised I had to get out of my sort of undergarments pretty quickly and get into some nice dry clothes. And I've got to be honest with you, it's the first time it properly hit me there, that how cold I got. You know, you can really see how, and the wind was blowing outside, it was really cold. You know, you can really see how hypothermia can strike, so it's imperative, nice dry clothing to put on. Get out of any wet clothes when you get into your tent, really important to help you to keep warm. So, and again, what to take? Well, I'm kind of more of the thin layers, plenty of thin layers. But again, there's so many dependents, depends what time of year you go, what the weather's like. But, you know, dry clothing, change of clothing, essential. First aid kit, not to forget the first aid kit. You never ever know when you might need it. Plasters, definitely, you have to consider blisters as well on these longer hikes. Yeah, I've suffered, I know my colleagues have suffered, my friends that I hike with. Blisters are a pain, but they are part of walking a long way. Doesn't matter if you've got the most comfortable boots in the world, eventually that skin rubbing all day long is going to give you some form of a blister. So it's great to be able to sort of wash, dress and attach a plaster to those before getting on your boots the next day, because that's painful. Bleaklow, when I did mine, I was wearing some what I thought were really comfortable boots, and I really struggled with some quite nasty blisters, and thankfully I had some good plasters with me to address them, because without them, I mean, as it was still quite painful putting on my boots the next morning. But yes, plasters most definitely. Probably a couple of bandages, and also ibuprofen, paracetamol, some form of painkillers is good. Also, middle age, whether it's just me, I tend to get a bit of indigestion, so perhaps a few antacid tablets as well always wouldn't go amiss. When you're eating this tin food or whatever in your tent, and then you're just lying straight down, well, you do get a bit of indigestion. So perhaps some Rennie or antacid tablets as well. That's what you'll find also in my first aid kit. But I think we're about there. But when I set off on this Pennine Way on my own, and it was, I hasten to add, the first solo sort of night out experience I had, I was telling a friend of mine, Costas, whom I was with on my first ever Wildcamp, and something happened when you see it in the video, there was a part, the beginning of the second day, where I got through quite a wild night, but I was walking along Bleaklow, and I keep saying this and I will say it again, it was quite bleak, but there was something rather beautiful in the bleakness, and the grouse would take off and make that wonderful strange gurgling noise, but everything I was looking around was making me smile. Something clicked, something happened, I do not know what it was, and I thought, this is wonderful. I was alone, I was in the middle of nowhere, enjoying nature. If you haven't done it yet, please go and do it. I recommend it. Something clicked, it's wonderful. I'm getting a bit deep and heavy here, and I can't really put it into good words, but I found my niche. I can't wait to get out there again. Thanks for watching.